Hello, my dear friends. The topic I'd like to discuss today is that of lawfare. I've mentioned this operation many times. It's basically the conjunction of law and warfare. So basically, warfare done through the means of law, through the means of the legal system. And I want to detail it a bit today, starting from the Romanian experience. I've read a book which details how this process took hold in Romania. Uh, you probably know that Romania was basically a showcase of this operation. This is the laboratory where it was first experimented with, and subsequently it was successfully applied in all sorts of other countries, including most famously in Latin America, with the conviction in Brazil of Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff, and in Argentina with the Kirchner husbands. But so basically, how this happens is the starting point is a country that is autonomous. Okay, so it is not part of any alliance system, and it tries to get into the American alliance system. And after it does, one of the key conditions is to have its secret services reformed, so to say, so that the people serving the ancien regime are no longer there in power in the secret services. This is code word for purging the elements which were hostile to the Americans, or which had done any kind of spying against the Americans, or who knew about the American playbook or about the Israeli playbook, basically about the playbook of all the Ukrainian playbook nowadays, the playbook of any foreign intelligence service which is somehow connected to the United States. The British one, of course, MI6 and so on. So basically, the people who know anything about how the West operates and how its proxies operate are kicked out, and they are replaced with servile people who are very much fond of the Americans, and who carry on the operation forward. And from that point onwards, how does it get into the legal system? Well, first of all, first and foremost, the American affiliated media and the American affiliated civil society has to broadcast in all places, domestic and international, the fact that the country in question is uniquely corrupt. Of course, corruption is a problem in any country, but the perception will be created that this particular country, the target country, is uniquely corrupt, the most corrupt, highly corrupt. All sorts of opinion polls saying this, all sorts of anecdotal evidence exaggerated in the media, and so on and so forth, to create this perception that corruption is something uniquely strong there, and so on. And once this perception at the international and domestic level is created, of course, the solution needs to come, and the solution comes once a politician is elected into office, which is sympathetic to the American agenda. From this point onwards, the corruption in question is called a national security threat. Why? Because corrupt countries are more susceptible to foreign interference. Of course, this has nothing to do with the fact that the Americans are coming over to corrupt the local politicians to make way for all sorts of unfavorable contracts for their unfavorable for the country and favorable for their multinational corporations, or that I don't know, all sorts of multinational companies bribe politicians. No, it's not that kind of corruption. It's the kind of corruption that state employees do for their own benefit, something like this, but it would not involve in any way the international capital. Of course, this is the main rule of the game. So once corruption has been named a national security threat, because of course it would allow foreign interests outside of the American and the Western realm to permeate power, to permeate to the higher echelons of power, then since it is declared a national security threat, of course the secret services, the intelligence community needs to work on it, right? Because they are there defending the national security. So how do they do it? Well, The first thing is to establish protocols, secret protocols, with all the elements of the justice system. So the domestic intelligence service drafts up protocols and then calls up the head of the public prosecutor office, the head of the magistrates council, and so on and so forth. The president of the highest court, the High Court of Cassation, and the yeah, the High Court of Cassation. It calls all these leaders of institutions from the legal system to sign these protocols. And what do these protocols entail? They entail the fact that the employees of the Secret Service, first and foremost, they become investigators in criminal cases. So they have a status equal to that of the prosecutor. They can create evidence, they can produce evidence in court. Then the judges themselves need to accept that evidence without questioning it and without offering the defendants a chance to question it. They come in these yellow envelopes. This was the case in Romania. So you had the prosecutor gathering up evidence in a case, and that evidence was also at the disposal of the defendant. But then you had also the intelligence worker, the intelligence service employee, who also produced evidence. It's maybe a bit out of place to say that he gathered evidence, but rather he produced evidence. And it came into these sealed envelopes, and it was presented to the judge without the defendant or his lawyer being privy to it, without the other side having any access to it. And the conviction was carried out on the basis of that evidence, which was not accessible to the defense. And that was that. So a lot of abuses were carried out, a lot of miscarriages of justice were carried out in this respect. And what was the main target? The main target was the cleansing of the higher echelons of Romanian society of any elements that were in some way independent, that were not part of the American mechanism, so to say, of the American system, both in the political realm and in the economic realm. So there were a lot of convictions of politicians from the old guard, but also uh, of businessmen who had subsequently had to sell their business, of course, to foreign capital and so on. But there were also many cases in which, because the evidence gathered was so low, the only effect that was produced was to smear the person in question, to force them out of politics because of this image of corrupt, even though even though no conviction was ever given. And once that target person is out of the political sphere, of course it can be acquitted, which was the case with many politicians. Many top politicians in Romania had this international image of being uniquely corrupt and so on and so forth, and the domestic image as well. And after being sent to court, being investigated for years on end, maybe even decades, they were finally acquitted. And the acquittal was not for the fact that the acts in question had finished their had reached their statute of limitations, but no, it was because the deeds were non-existent. This is basically the reason for acquittal, the fact that everything was just a made-up conjecture of the prosecutor's office, and there were many such cases. So this is how a country falls under the complete control of the Americans. And of course, from that point onwards, once the political class is docile and there's no sign of autonomy there, everybody is just a pawn of the American embassy there. From that point onwards, once sovereigntist opposition becomes a minority and becomes marginal, From that point onwards, you can just deem it misinformation, disinformation, hate speech. You can just deem it Russian propaganda, Chinese propaganda, whatever, because it's already been marginalized, so it's a minority. It's easy to sell the idea that because it's a minority idea, it's probably a fringe idea, and so on. So you can run away with the story that all of the people who are against the American agenda are paid by the Russians. In a country like Romania, there is also quite a lot of people willing to believe that. So you very often get this reply once you tell people that you'd like Romania to stop licking the boot of the United States. You get this reply, and then to lick the boot of whom? Of Russia? So there are quite a lot of people here who cannot imagine themselves in a different scenario than licking a boot. It's like if you tell them stop licking the boot of the Americans, what they hear is not stop licking a boot in general. What they hear is start licking another boot, start licking the Russian boot. So yeah, of course, when you're faced with such false dichotomies, it's hard to get your message across. But this is what I wanted to talk to you about. If you're interested in the book that I was referring to, which documents the case of Romania and the lawfare operation here that's been carried out from 2005 to 2020, you can buy it. It's called Noaptea Dreptății Românești 2005-2020, written by a judge. I forgot his name, but anyway, if you look it up, you'll find it. So, and another piece of the puzzle I forgot to mention, another piece of the lawfare puzzle. So, it is also necessary to establish a separate prosecutor's office. So in any country, you have the magistrate's corps, you have the public prosecutor's office, which is hierarchical. But because you need to fight corruption, you create this anti-corruption directorate, which is not a part of the regular prosecutor's office. It is independent from it. It is not completely independent in the sense that, of course, the state propaganda, the propaganda, the pro-American propaganda in that country keeps saying that it's independent. Well, it's independent from the magistrates' corps, but it is not politically independent because, of course, its head is nominated by the president, and it can bypass the regular hierarchy in the prosecutor's office, which was the case in Romania. So not only the head of that prosecutor's office did not have the professional rank necessary to be leading such a structure and to investigate the type of crimes, the high-level crimes that they were mandated with, but also the prosecutors in that structure. They were all starters in their careers. They did not have the necessary seniority and experience. They did not have the professional rank to be investigating top politicians, to be investigating judges, and so on and so forth. And those people had the unique prerogative of investigating judges, or investigating public magistrates of all kinds. So not only did they have the prerogative of investigating everything that has to do with corruption, any type of corrupt activity, but they also had the unique prerogative, the unique jurisdiction of investigating crimes in the justice system. So what they did in order to make sure that the judges in question played ball and did not acquit their defendants, was that they would start criminal procedures against all the judges for blackmail purposes. So you'd just make up some facts, you'd just make up some deeds, and you would have the file dormant there. And in case the judge decides to acquit to acquit the defendant, so to acquit the person that you charged, then you pull out the file and you start investigating that judge. And of course, you have the unique prerogative of issuing arrest warrants and so on, so you can destroy the career of that judge. The law in Romania said that if a judge is merely investigated for a criminal offense, not necessarily convicted, but merely investigated, then he has to quit uh, being a judge, and for the duration of the investigation, uh, he needs to he needs to leave the magistrate's corps. So you can imagine that you basically destroy the career of any judge by just launching an investigation. You don't need to find anything. You don't need to get a conviction at the end of the line. You can get an acquittal without any problems, which was actually the case in Romania. Many of those people were finally acquitted, but they had to stop being judges in the meantime, and many of them did not return to being judges, did not return to the magistrate's corps afterwards. So yeah, this is another instrument that you have. So this being said, if you like what I do, you know what you should do: like, share, subscribe, send hate mail, uh, share me to a friend, and so on. So until next time, bye.